Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see everybody back for our first event of the season. Couldn't be a better one. Welcome to those of you here in the audience and those of you who are on the live stream. I'm Carolyn Waters, head librarian here at the New York Society Library. And Katie Freakus is in the back. If you want to purchase a book, she'll be happy to sell you one, and I'm sure that Betsy would be happy to sign one for you. We are absolutely delighted to have back with us this evening Elizabeth Barlow Rogers, a longtime New York Society Library member. She's spoken for us about 4 of her past books, most recently on Saving Central Park, A History and a Memoir in 2018. In addition, Betsy collaborated with our head of exhibitions, Harriet Shapiro, on the gorgeous library exhibition, Writing the Garden, a literary conversation across 2 centuries. And they published a book in association with that exhibition. Alongside her extensive writings, Betsy is well known to New Yorkers as the central organizer of the restoration of Central Park in the 1980s, the founding president of the Central Park Conservancy, and the longstanding president of the Foundation for Landscape Studies. Among her many honors and awards, she holds the Rockefeller Foundation's 2010 Jane Jacobs Medal for Lifetime Achievement. The Publisher's Weekly review of Betsy's Saving Central Park speaks of her passion for the responsibility of maintaining green spaces in the cement jungle. Her new book, Writing New York, reflects her affection for the green spaces and the paved ones, the stones beneath, and the waters that surround us. In these essays, culture, architecture, urban planning history, and landscape architecture come together. The New Criterion has written, Elizabeth Barlow Rogers has done much to save the landscapes of New York. This collection is a historical and personal reflection on a lifetime of urban preservation. We look forward to learning more from Betsy. But with her tonight is Jonathan Lippincott from the Library of American Landscape History, who will be up first to say a few words about how the book came to be published. So, welcome, Jonathan and Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming this evening. I just want to introduce the Library of American Landscape History. Betsy needs less introduction than we do, I think, at this point. The Library of American Landscape History is the leading publisher of books that advance the study and practice of American landscape architecture, from gardens and parks to city plans. LALH books educate the public, motivating stewardship of significant places in the environment, and inspire new designs that connect people with nature. Founded in 1992, LALH is the only nonprofit organization dedicated to publishing in the field of American landscape history. Our books are informative, engaging, and priced affordably, thanks to the generous gifts of our supporters. I'm delighted to be here for Betsy's presentation this evening. We're very proud of publishing this collection, and it was a great pleasure to work with Betsy on this collection. It's different essays that she's written over the years about the different landscapes of New York City and beyond, and no one could be a better guide to these places than Betsy. So I also wanted to thank Sarah Holliday for putting this event together and everyone at the Society Library. It's certainly nice to be back to things in person at long last. So I hope you enjoy this evening's presentation. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Well, I have been affiliated with LALH for a long time, both as a board member and a great admirer of Robin Carson's mission to build a library in a field where there was no serious literature based on scholarship about the careers of professional landscape architects from the period following Frederick Law Olmsted up to the present day. With over 50, is that right, 50 books published to date, LALH has furthered that ambitious goal to a large extent. In addition to the careers of post-Olmsted landscape architects, it has brought to light the ambitions and successes of the creators of the national parks and the design principles and achievements of modern landscape architects. Now, LALH is focusing on essays by contemporary practitioners such as landscape architect Laurie Olin and me as a landscape historian. I'm very proud of this, Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, you're assuming the title of publisher recently, and while not forsaking your role as a professional book designer with a reputation for outstanding, beautiful book covers. Where is mine? Where is mine? Okay, we'll see it later, where you can buy it outside. Okay, reputation for your beautiful layouts as well at Farrar Straus, and you will get a sense of his expertise in this area when you pick up my books. I'm promoting. And look at its dust jacket, and then open its pages and notice the fine Sabon text, font, and layout of the illustrations. You should note also that while assuming the title of publisher, Jonathan remains the graphic designer of all of LALH's beautiful print publications, including View magazine. You've done that forever, I mean, many, many years. And it's and other beautiful print publications. And also, I think you are doing the graphic design of the website, right? LALH's internet presence. With Robin's continuing her role as editorial director, this outstanding not-for-profit organization continues to serve the community of professional landscape architects and also the general reader who is interested in well-written books on gardens, parks, and city planning. It is Robin who chose the title for my book after I gave her a description of the contents of several boxes of old manuscripts dating back to the early 1970s that I had taken out of my Long Island house when it was sold. Oh, cleaning out the attic. What you find. There were my Wellesley term papers. A's. And anyway, I found the manuscripts, and some of them were typed scripts with carbon paper as well as the handwritten ones. Anyway, getting clumsy here. And so, anyway, there were these old manuscripts dating back to the early 1970s, and so Robin had the idea that you can't publish them all. I mean, we'll select. You're a New Yorker. They should be essays about New York. So that's where the title Writing New York. And I really like it because it chimes with, can you see this? Writing the Garden, which was published in 2011 right here in New York Society Library to complement the exhibition right outside this room that Harriet Shapiro and I co-curated. Like the way Robin helped me winnow down 30-some-odd vintage manuscripts to 13 that are specifically about my enthusiastically adopted home. And that's true. This is a girl from San Antonio, Texas, my home where I have lived since 1965. Several of these were published in New York Magazine. Ta-da. Can you see? This is back in June 1976. Keep Central Park green. How your time and money can help save Central Park, I think is the title. Anyway, there it is. And so that's one that I found in the attic. What happened? This was just great because this was still the days of the little Central Park Task Force. that morphed into the Conservancy. This was, I'll just back up a little bit. You remember Adele Auchincloss, the wife of Louis, and Adele was very much a conservationist, an early conservationist, and she had gotten from Brooke Astor a grant. Abe Beam had his park commissioner. I'm not giving a name, sort of a playboy, and he'd go to dinner parties and ask whoever was there, you want to be a commissioner in the park department? And Adele came in, and anyway, but she is the one who really, the private fundraising, she started it with Brooke and also with Iphigene Sulzberger. Anyway, this was the beginning of fundraising in Central Park, and so she had to retire when the park commissioner was kicked out. I'm not going to take any more of those hacks from City Hall. Okay, so you can go, and Adele had to go too. And anyway, enough. But there I was with the Central Park Task Force, and not too long after that, 1980, we founded the Central Park Conservancy. But it was because of that magazine article that all the letters that came in, I remember pushing the carriage with the twins. I remember proposing to my wife. I remember saying the Pledge of Allegiance. This is an immigrant daughter with my mother at the Conservatory Garden when they lowered the flag. And so that's when, the $10, the, 25, the 10,000 from the woman who won the lottery. And so won a lottery. And anyway, I knew, okay, this is it. We can have a public-private partnership. Private citizens are going to reclaim Central Park, which was really terrible. It was a disgrace. I won't go further into the table of contents in my new book, except to say that it deals with the city's formidable geological infrastructure, its great natural history institutions, including the New York Botanical Garden. You're going to have Gregory Long, you published him as well as part of this new series of essays. And so Botanical Garden and the American Museum of Natural History. And there is where I really think that the wonderful dioramas, they're great works of art, really wonderful. And I also give here the history of the creation of Greenwood Cemetery as a scenic landscape that influenced Olmsted and Calvert Box's romantic designs for Central Park and Prospect Parks. And New York's 520-mile waterfront couldn't be ignored. So there is an article that I first published in Smithsonian Magazine on the creation of South Street Seaport. And one that I wrote later on the creation of the Brooklyn Bridge Park for the Cityscape News. It's really good when you're right in the beginning and something is being born. It's not yet, as these became, successful. Okay, so I have more or less covered these notes. Let me see. Have I covered them all? I guess maybe I have, but right now is my chance to say how this library has meant a lot to me over the years. And also you see Ted Rogers in the back of the room. Ted is a former board member, and we feel very close. And so do all of you, I know, because it is such a special institution in the life of the city. Okay, that's it, except for any questions you want to ask me.
I'd love to ask a question, if that sounds good. Just because you mentioned when you joined us, excuse me, I'm going to take this off for a second. You mentioned when you arrived this evening that you walked across Central Park to be here tonight. Beautiful weather for it. So what strikes you most when you spend time in the park today? Happy things, poignant things, things that bring up memories specifically, generally?
Well, here in this very room, who is the volunteer in the park that I just met? Okay, but there you are, okay. And it's also the men and women who have given their whole professional lives. I hired a lot of them, some of you remember Doug Blonsky and Neil Calvanese, and these people have really, people think that every spring I paint every blossom. But it's really the people who have done it, not for me, but for Central Park. And the fact that it is the first public-private partnership for a park in this country. And people have come, many people have come and want to use this as a role model. And their success has been maybe my greatest pride. I mean, the fact that it did succeed and become Central Park Conservancy, an institution. It has an Institute of Urban something that was teaching, you will know, facility within the Conservancy. And it's just something, I guess, when I go to the park, people say, what is your favorite part of the park? And of course, we were walking here, we were looking at, there's wonderful elms right over there, as you know. But I will never say I have a favorite part, because it really is about the circulation system. It is about moving through the park. It's about the changing scenes, going from woodland to water, to lake, to the meadows, all of it. And so that is what I really love most.
Did you think when you began, that it would?
I'm just, these are the elder ears here.
Yes, did you think when you started this, because obviously it was a new experience for everybody.
Come closer.
What did you feel it was? Did you believe it was going to blossom the way it did?
Oh, did I believe it? Well, no. Okay, people ask a lot of times, I mentioned people starting new conservancies, and what does it take? This is so, it's kind of trite. It takes the 3 Ps: patience, passion, and persistence. And I really did I had a vision of the restored park, and it was a vision, and I think because I was a writer also, I could write, things like this. I could write the annual reports, I could write appeal letters to donors and all of that, and then don't say annual reports. So it did really help me a lot to build an organization. I always believed it. I mean, people think that there's some magic, and you sit down with Dick Gilder and a few wealthy people, and they're going to fix this and that and fix the other thing. And it's not that. It is about, well, first of all, you have to have a board that really supports you and backs you, and then you have to have a plan. We didn't call it a master plan, a management and restoration plan. And it was in-house landscape architects that I had hired, and it was staff, some of them, some consultants, architectural report, hydrology, or all of those things. But then what we did is like a jigsaw puzzle. When we published this, we published it in 1985, and that was, I wish I had that hold up. It was rebuilding Central Park, a management, first word management, a management and restoration plan. And so by showing district by district, section by section, that really was key to fundraising. So when somebody wanted to fund a playground, okay, right around it and the entrance to the park, right, a few feet away. And so that's the way in which we appeal to donors. And I guess it worked, and people have ownership in that park. I mean, it is a people's park. And the greatest expression of American democracy. And I think the greatest work of art is. Yes.
Did you find it tricky working with the city, the administrations coming and going?
Did I find it
Difficult working with the politicians, this public part of the public-private conservancy? With
That's a hard question.
Did I find it easy working with the workers in the field? They had city titles. They were civil servants, I guess, and they were unionized. And it took 3 men to prune the tree. You had to have the climber, you had to have the guy who handed up the tools, and you had to have the MVO, the motor vehicle operator, then went to the next tree or to the coffee break outside the park. And that's, okay, I'm not going to be hard on unions. I mean, I really shouldn't be. But it was not that we were welcome. And the administration didn't really welcome us into the door. And we had, the staff was our horticultural, young horticulturists, horticultural interns and first staff members. The place that it's in the Tupelo Meadow, it's a comfort station really, and also a storage place for tools and all of that thing, and probably pesticides. Okay, that's where they put them. And then eventually we wormed our way into 79th Street Yard, where and it built. It really did build. But the big victory, and it didn't happen really until right after I left. I wanted it all the time. I wanted the concession revenues. But that would be a real city private partnership.
Right.
But finally, the board member, Brian Milson, the lawyer, and Henry Stern, the commissioner, they did get the corporation council to do the contract, and that is really important because Central Park now does get an appropriation from the city. I'm not sure how much it is. I want to say $4 million a year, maybe more. And I wish I had in my head the right figure for an annual budget. It's like a big museum or something. It's over $40 million a year to run the park. So it's a lot of money. And there's an endowment now. It's really is, it has gone beyond my wildest dreams.
Wonderful.
Jonathan.
Betsy, I wonder if you would talk a bit about the similarities and the differences in what Homestead and Vox did in Central Park and in Prospect Park. Because I feel like in many ways they're both so beautiful, but they do have a very different feel when you're walking through them. So if you could talk a bit about those two parks in particular, that would be great.
First of all, I just want to say this. And if you read Homestead's biography, you'll see that the Civil War comes, and he is still with Vox. They are the official landscape park. You still have the Board of Commissioners. You haven't had Lost Tweed and it changed to simply a city agency. But there is Homestead. This is still in, the late 1860s. When he is at the Mariposa Mines, he's married his brother John's widow, and he has to support the family. And the war, Civil War, isn't over yet. But he does take this job where he can theoretically earn some money. It didn't happen at the managing the Mariposa Mines in California. He prided himself more than anything on being a good manager and really having grown his father 1,000 men, under his management. And they built the park. I mean, you look at the Manhattan's outpost, leaving some of those beautiful glacier scoured bedrocks, but also they had blasting away. I mean, there was lots of stone. I mean, masonry, stone cutters. So just look at some of the steps in the bedrock sometimes to climb the bedrock, and look at the waterfalls. Go through the ground with the gill. You'll see the waterfalls. And so the way in which the stones, just look at those stones. There are a few what they call erratic boulders from the glacier that are there. Anyway, back to your question of Homestead and Docks and the difference between the two parks. Okay, so in Prospect Park, you don't have that same geology. And I'm not going to say that that's, wrong, it's just true. And what you have is very good soil. And you have originally, and Fox did this because the site that the Brooklyn commissioners had chosen, it was not the site, I mean, it was on the site, but it didn't include the boundaries. I mean, I think it included where the museum was, Brooklyn Museum and the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, but it didn't, it was divided by Flatbush Avenue. And so this was not good. And Vox was the one who drew the boundaries that you know today, which are beautiful, which allowed the lake to be constructed. And then he is also the one who wrote Homestead. And he wanted Homestead, again, to be his partner. I mean, they were the collaborators. And he couldn't do it. He's an architect. And he knows, Homestead he invents the profession. He starts the profession of landscape architecture in America, but there is no such thing. But there is his sensibility and his eye and his love of nature and naturalistic. It's a naturalistic aesthetic. So anyway, he wants Homestead to come back and help him partner with him again in Prospect Park. And he writes, and he said, God meant for you to be, I don't know what we should call ourselves. I think landscape architect is the right term. And that is really, I say, the beginning of the profession here in America. So Prospect Park, different topography, but it's the same aesthetic. It's the picturesque. So you have the long meadow and the long views. You go through the Endale Arch, and then it opens up, and you see, thank you, Robert Moses, there are ball fields at the end of the long meadow, but really the ideal of being able to see beyond the boundaries of the park. Now, this is romanticism. It really is the romantic and picturesque style. And think back to England in the 18th century, and it derives from that. And that is their aesthetic in both parks, but you see it, I think maybe more so in Prospect Park. Okay.
What about some of the other
city parks. Do you write about them in your book? For instance, I live in Astoria, Queens now.
I'm sorry, I moved. So
I live in Astoria, Queens, and we
Yes.
have a beautiful park, Astoria Park, that's on the edge of the East River. It's magnificent.
It's in Astoria.
Yeah,
Do you have a swimming pool in it?
yes, we do. I think it's the largest public pool in the city.
Okay, we have to talk about someone else.
All right.
Robert Moses. So what happens is you have another aesthetic. It's not about the tranquility of nature as a respite from the busy city. It's about recreation, and people, it's the depression. And people, leisure becomes a word. People want activities in the park. It had already begun, even before Moses, the idea of having, playing ball and having other activities. Moses himself, I think he was a swimmer and a great swimmer. So when you look at the beaches, you go out, to Astoria. You look at the community centers and you look at all the swimming pools. And that all dates from Robert Moses. And also look at the 22 playgrounds in Central Park. We're not going to take them away, but 1934, in 1 year. See, Homestead, you forget it. And it didn't even probably know who Homestead was, didn't care. But all of the little parking lots. See what the Cherry Hill and Fountain is? We had to, we're doing that and get the cars out. So anyway, Robert Moses was there for the good and for the bad. And so I'm pretty hard on him. And I do have,
Thankfully
in my
so.
book, if you want to read it, there it is, an essay on Robert Moses. So
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Have you ever visited any of the parks in Buffalo, New York? Oh, they're beautiful, all designed by Homestead.
Oh, yes.
Delaware Park. And stuff like that.
The Foundation for Landscape Studies, I didn't stop working after Central Park. I had something called the Cityscape Institute, which didn't get very far with the Department of Transportation about new lights and the sanitation department, new kinds of receptacles on the streets, but never mind that. Anyway, what were we talking about? Just say the question again. Buffalo. Yes, the Foundation for Landscape Studies. That is the organization that for 15 years, and we have recently de-incorporated. Just, I guess it's just a time of life. It's a thing that one does. I say to Ted, we're in the zone, we're in the age of octogenarians, something like that. So anyway, it was time after 15 years. And having some of the essays are from Sightlines, the journal that we published for the foundation. And so that is no more. And what were you saying? I'm sorry. That's
The Buffalo has some beautiful parks, Buffalo, New York, designed by Homestead.
I'm just telling you,
They're all
the
good.
foundation, I went off on a tangent, the Foundation for Landscape Studies organized a tour with the board. And Jonathan came, and Jonathan can tell about it, and it was wonderful. Lauren Belfer, who's a wonderful novelist, is from Buffalo, and you have her books, and she just loves her native city and has written about it. City of Light, first book, etc. We can talk about those. And so anyway, yes, Buffalo parks and the parkways. Now remember, it is about linkage. It's about what you have in the Emerald Necklace in Boston. It's what you have in Louisville, what you have in Buffalo. And Buffalo really is the first example of that. And Homestead and Vox were still partners at that point, and they designed the Buffalo parks and parkways.
Beautiful.
There's a gentleman in the back.
Yes. Two of our newest parks, Hudson River and Brooklyn Bridge. What do you think?
You remember Brooklyn Bridge?
Park, Brooklyn Bridge Park and the Hudson River Park.
And
Hudson River.
What do you think of them?
What do you think of them?
Brooklyn Bridge Park?
Yes.
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's really, I mean, the bridge is just so remarkable. And really, I think it's Michael Van Valkenburg, the landscape architect. I think he did a very good job and taking those little piers. And I think that it's just fine. I like it. But how do you feel about it?
Oh, I love it. And how do you feel about the Hudson River Park?
Well, the Hudson River Park, yeah, I think it's fine. I'm glad to have the riverside reclaimed that way. But, you know, this is a revisionist kind of perspective, and I think it was in Philip Lopate. I have an excerpt of his essay on the waterfront, one of his essays, one of the chapters in the book. But this is a revisionist perspective. And because defeating Westway was the big, big contentious battle. And some of you remember that. And so he said, oh, if, you know, it had happened and the highway had been sunk, just like the FDR, you know, down to the water level, and it wouldn't be visible, it'd be like the Brooklyn Bridge, probably not anyway. It would come all the way from Riverside Park uptown, and then it would come downtown across those blocks. And so instead of having to take your life in your hands by going across this highway, which has been repurposed as a boulevard, that it would be better. Now, I'm not going to opine anymore on that, because you go down there and it's nice to get across it was what, Highway 9, and is that right? Anyway, to walk along that particular promenade, to see some of the artworks that have been done, to get to Battery Park. And that is, of course, that's my friend Maury Price, the Battery Conservancy. And they're doing great things down there. So it's all part of reclamation of the waterfront. Now that, you know, it's shipping is, they do have, you know, the Queen Mary, you know, comes in, and a little bit of that happens, but no more shipping. And so the High Line is now a result of that fact, because without the shipping and all of the trade that implies, the meat market, you know, is gone now in Washington Street, I think it was. Anyway, and so all of these Hudson Yards and that area just fell into disuse, and the rail spur and that's my friend Robert Hammond, also from San Antonio, you know, had the bright idea, and went to a community planning board meeting, and he and I can't remember Josh's last name, they teamed and they created it. And again, it was like Central Conservancy was just an improbable dream, very improbable, but they got the politics right, and City Hall came along, and then the fundraising was great, and they went to all the neighbors, and some in the housing project had pizza parties, and you know, and so they brought everybody on board, and Now, you know what the story is, and I'm sure you really love that too, right?
What they didn't get right on the High Line is city planning.
Oh, sorry.
What they didn't get right on the High Line is the city planning around it.
That the city planning around the High Line is not ideal.
The planning around the High Line.
That was the
Yes, the
comment.
the planning, the architectural planning, which we call it that, around the High Line is a disaster.
It's a success
It's
because
a disaster. I mean, in terms of the way, it wasn't designed. And the High Line now is in shadow, we're just talking about plans.
you mean the buildings.
Yes,
What it
and
did, which was
And they
I
were
think,
not, there was not a thoughtful.
it was such an attraction that the real estate
No,
developers
no, I know that.
just came along and gobbled up all
But
the contiguous real estate.
to that point, I'm just curious, do you believe that parks should have planning around them so that they
Yes.
can, because now we have all these skyscrapers that are growing taller and taller around Central Park.
Tell it to the developers and tell it
Right.
to the city because they want the taxes.
Right, but I'm just curious, you're thinking about, does the park exist in a vacuum, or is it part of a greater city that
Yeah.
we have to think about as well?
Well, I can't say that I disagree, but I do think that what this started again was it became a model. And other cities, they want their High Lines. And so they are repurposing, whether it's spurs of railroad or what it is, but infrastructure that is obsolete. And I think that in itself really is a good thing. But the thing that if you really want to be critical is Hudson Yards. I don't think that's such a huge success, turning that into kind of a mall, and a chic mall with fancy stores. I can't say that I really just love that. And that, of course, is right there, on the High Line, next to the High Line. The High Line
With access.
Yeah.
No, may I just make a comment?
Sure.
I think, I don't know how we would have gotten through these past 2 years of the health crisis without the park. It was healing. The beauty was just healing. And I'm so grateful, and we all are very grateful for it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
It
Oh,
was
yeah.
wonderful.
Ted and I, there's Ted.
Thank you.
Oh, I did not find me. I mean, really, really. Well, in the case of the Conservancy, it's Betsy Smith, but it's really going out
So beautiful.
every day and seeing. We take a walk at different times of day. It's sometimes in the late afternoon, starting to get,
Yeah.
dusk begins to fall, and the light changes all the time. It was wonderful when I came over here on the west side. Just
Beautiful.
an hour.
Thank you.
And anyway, there are people say all the time, I don't know how I could live in New York without Central Park. Yeah, we went through that. But during this COVID, it's more so.
Oh,
And
yeah.
people have been just extremely grateful.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
And do you think that the environmental movement of the past years has helped, form the park? Has it made it easier to convince the powers that be in the city that this is a worthwhile thing to do? Because it's, the environment that we're realizing is so important.
I was thinking, remember my birthday, that was
Right,
in Central
right.
Park, and it was, 1970.
70 something.
And when, maybe, really, I think it was it. And birthday, was the beginning of this environmental consciousness. And I think certainly, in the Ramble, it's native plants that are, replacing, the old Japanese knotweed,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
very invasive. Where's our volunteer back there?
Goes on and on.
So, yeah, and, no, it's kind of eco-horticulture. And it's, just caring for, it's all part of, this loving of nature. And so that is, the ecosystem since the environmental movement. And I think the parks really do stimulate that a lot.
That's good.
I just was going to throw in, I think that the book has an essay related to Joan Jacobs, whose work is being ever more valued these days, I think. I hope so, yes, exactly. Is there something you might want to share from that essay or from your experience of her work, and especially the way in which her work is perhaps more relevant now, or especially relevant now?
Well, Jane and Me is the name of that essay. And no, Jane and Me was, I went to, when my former husband went to Yale Law School, I went to city planning school, but that's because I had read, first edition, is it 1960, 61, I think, or 62, Death and Life of Great American Cities. And I was very influenced by that, and that's what decided me to want to be a city planner. Oh, my professors didn't like that so much because this was master planning and, where do we put the industry and the commerce and the residential, all of that. So I wasn't very popular. Anyway, I got my city planning degree and my, was always open space planning was what I was interested in. But Jane, she had a lot of followers, and she did, I think, I take a little issue with this, because she thought the parks, were places, for, you have to read what she says about that, but they were, sort of for bums and things like that, and they were discriminated on, but it was not that she really loved. She did love nature, I think. I think she was an environmentalist, but I don't think she was kind in what she said about parks in that book. But I have to go back and read it to see if I still have that impression. You can read what I said in my book.
I was just going to pitch you one more question, a little self-interested, but what is a green space or another place in the city that you love and feel more people should know about? We know about Central Park, what don't we know about?
Oh gosh, I wish I were more up to date. There is in Queens something that is being created that is, it's not a high line, it's sort of a low line. I think, I cannot tell because I don't remember, I haven't read enough about it. And I don't, I'm sort of a has-been in a way. I'm no longer, I like my title, Administrator of Central Park, as well as President of the Conservancy, and that dual title was always important. We said public-private partnership, so I had a seat at the conference table, and so I knew about park policy back then, and I'm not too up to date right now, I'm sorry to say.
Mm-hmm. But someplace that you personally like to visit, or really they're right there? They're all right there.
Yeah, there are, and yeah, it really is. Oh, and I know what's really good is the community gardens, and we're talking about volunteers and Sheridan Square, and the fact that people have loved these little parks. Okay, let's talk about community gardens, and so you want the greening of the city, and that is really, really wonderful kind of volunteerism. And so that I'm much more knowledgeable about, a little bit knowledgeable about than I am about new parks.
Thank you so much.